If you or someone you know struggles with addiction, stay right here for the Recovery Boys. Lewis Finch and Macon Moy discuss alcoholism, drug addiction, co-occurring disorders, and life in recovery. And now, here's Lewis and Macon.
I'm Macon.
And I'm Lewis.
And we are the Recovery Boys. Lewis, it's been a while.
It has.
Since we have shot up our podcast here. I've been traveling. You've been traveling.
Yeah.
Things have been busy. How was you were talking about the Blues Festival. Did you have a good time?
Had a great time.
You're the only person not drinking?
I was the only person there not drinking. Of course, the Blues Festival is basically just a bunch of old hippies sitting in the middle of the field drinking beer and smoking pot. And
I remember those days.
Yeah,
I remember those days. Used to be one of them. Until I wasn't.
Well, and you just got back from Costa Rica.
We did. My sweet wife and her sister, Taylor and Cameron, had bought a auction item for. They were raising money for one of the hunts, and they bought this thing a couple years ago. And then, of course, the COVID hit, and we couldn't use it. And then, I got diagnosed with cancer, and so that eliminated my ability to travel for a while.
Sure.
And so the people who they bought the trip from were just so nice, and they allowed us to use it. So we went, and I'm telling you, Costa Rica, place that I would definitely go back to, but I could live in Costa Rica.
Really?
It's beautiful. People were beautiful. I felt safe the whole time. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. And we were on the Pacific side of Costa Rica. And so we were in a place called Jaco, which is Jaco, but they pronounce it Jaco.
Okay.
And it's famous for surf.
Okay.
And so
yes.
we watched the surfers, and the waves were, it was like watching one of those surf channels.
Was your house nice?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
What was it like doing it sober?
You know what? It made a lot more sense.
You able to enjoy it a little bit better?
I was, and it's funny. Half the people that we were there with, they don't have an alcohol or addiction problem, and so they were all excited about buying, getting their little cocktails station set up and everything, and they'd have wine or whatever, and it was nice to see how normal people drink. It never. I used to look at a fifth of vodka, and if it was half empty, my mind was preoccupied with where am I going to get the next? I need to go get another bottle. Most people will run out and think, well, I'll get another one next week.
You're actually anxious because you're afraid you're going to run out.
Run out, and
isn't it sick?
The honest answer is, I knew I was going to run out because I was going to drink. I was going to drink it all.
Of course.
And so I was already considering, because if you're a real drug addict or a real alcoholic, you don't ever really get comfortable. You're always either in the acquisition phase or the use phase. But the problem with the use phase is that it requires the acquisition phase to continue.
Absolutely.
And so it does become it's uncomfortable. It's anxious. You never, if you're a seasoned alcoholic or drug addict like I was or like we were, you don't ever really get a chance to enjoy it because you're always worried about running out.
Exactly right.
Well,
we were talking the other day about cocaine.
Unbelievable.
And that was part of my story. In fact, it was interesting because I used it. I wasn't necessarily addicted to cocaine, but I used it to stay awake, to drink longer.
That's exactly right.
And I was afraid when I was buying larger and larger packages of Coke as my addiction progressed.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We used to, we'd start out buying what the street term was an 8-ball.
Yeah, oh yes.
Get an 8-ball, and we would say, well, we'll sell half of it, get our money back, and then we'll use the other half. It's like we never sold any of it.
No, not a bit. Nope.
Never sold it. But it is, it's incredibly eye-opening that people were snorting cocaine again.
How much it has come back?
It has, and it's almost. We were laughing about it yesterday. back in the day, if you went into a bathroom, nobody went into the bathroom to use the bathroom.
No.
Everybody went into the bathroom to do a little bump here, a little bump there, or whatever. And the fact that people are doing it again when there's fentanyl, I mean, it's not like you don't know that fentanyl's in this country, and it's not like you don't know that the drug dealers are cutting whatever they can cut to increase the potency and the volume, because fentanyl is obviously a cheap product for them.
Well, and you know, I think it wasn't one of your daughter's friends. Didn't he die as a result?
He did. I mean, and he was not a drug user. He was just caught up probably in the social moment. Everybody's doing it. Well, maybe I'll just try it one time. And, you know, people, I mean, it's incredibly sad to think that somebody used drugs for the first time and it killed them. But that's what happened in this particular instance. And let me tell you, if you're buying, and I had this conversation with one of the younger people that I do some work with, if you're buying street drugs, you're in effect putting a gun to your head.
Well,
it's Russian roulette.
You don't know what you're getting.
It's impossible to
know.
And
to the point about your daughter's friend, evidently there was fentanyl in the cocaine, which, if you really consider the fact that coke is a stimulant and fentanyl is a depressant, or but they're designed for two totally different uses. The person that put that fentanyl in the coke was looking for that outcome.
Yeah,
it had to have been.
Yeah,
because it makes no other sense.
Well, I mean, it's other than they're all in it for money. You know, that's what they're in it for, and it makes it more powerful, which, you know, I forget who we were talking to. We were telling them that with the word of the street that this guy's got something with fentanyl in it, his price and his volume goes up, because
very much so.
The drug addict, the real drug addict, is always pushing the envelope to see how much higher they can get. I mean, we were talking about the Narcan parties. Can you imagine going to a party where you know that there's a chance that you'll overdose, and you need to count on other alcoholics or drug addicts to bring you back to life?
With Narcan.
Yeah, I just don't see that as something I want to do.
No, well, in particular our age. I mean, we were also discussing the fact that at that, the younger you are, the more invincible you tend to be or think you are, and that's what's happening with this generation of the young guys who are guys and girls who are dying.
Well, and you know, we talked about what you know, we haven't done a podcast in a while, and we really didn't have a specific subject other than the one thing that we probably do more of in our role here at Wellwyn, doing our intervention work as well as you know, helping navigate treatment for people, is educate people.
Correct.
And how dangerous the information on the internet can be. You know, I find it interesting, and I'll use that term because it won't get me in trouble, but I find it interesting that they now have this disinformation committee. It's almost like we're watching a comedy.
Yeah.
You know, the real world has become a comedy where it's us and them. If you don't believe in what we say, then if you're not for us, then you got to be against us.
Right.
You know, and so that mentality, and in the meantime, there's a whole generation of young people growing up with addiction problems. I mean, the one thing that the COVID pandemic certainly created in our society is an increase of mental illness and an increase of alcoholism.
Very much so.
I mean, the drug use, I'm sure, has gone up some, but I don't think it's even come close to growing as much as alcoholics. I was with this week was a big week for my annual checkups with my cancer doctors, and I was having a conversation with my transplant doctor in Chapel Hill, and he was asking me about the business, and I was explaining to him that, you know, we're kind of an executive program. I mean, we deal with people other than executives, but we certainly have our share of business executives, and how we were seeing more pure alcoholics than we've ever seen.
Right.
And he said, "Why do you think that?" I said, "It's because they used to be in an office environment where maybe some of the more adventurous business executives would keep a bottle in their drawer somewhere. Some of them, if they're, you know, have a big enough job at work, can have the credenza with the, you know, you can have the alcohol there.
The wet bar.
The wet bar, so you can celebrate this or celebrate that. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of these guys started drinking at lunch
Yeah.
And if
At
you go,
home.
at home, that's what I'm
yeah.
saying. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
accountability. There's no business decorum goes out the window. And so yeah, we have seen a ton of that. And the one thing that we hear, Lewis, I don't know, more times than not, the one question I get, which is always a hard one for me to answer, is what should I do?
Right.
What should I do? And I know, all of our therapists here at Wellwind know every situation's different. There's no cookie cutter approach to addiction and alcoholism. Everybody's got every person's got a story. Let's face it, the world's made up of stories, right? Everybody's got a story. And so everybody's got a different, there's a different narrative. People drink and do drugs for all kinds of reasons. But how do you fix them, or how do you address that? Everybody, it's based on the circumstances, right?
Well, and to your point about the comment about the alcohol usage going up, I saw a statistic prior to coronavirus. Deaths by alcohol were still above deaths by drugs, slightly. I think there was like a 10,000 person per year differential. Obviously, drug use went up, deaths from drugs went up as well, but alcohol deaths went up along with it as well. And if I remember correctly, prior to the coronavirus, the number, if I remember, was around 70,000 per year died from alcohol. 70,000, I take it back, 70,000 died from drug overdoses, 80,000 died from alcohol-related deaths. That number from alcohol has gone up over 100,000 in about 3 years.
Unbelievable.
Which, it really spiked because that number from alcohol, if you looked at it prior to coronavirus, had been fairly consistent, and the drug overdoses deaths were climbing at a faster pace. Alcohol deaths actually have surpassed their prior increases. The other part is, and I think which most people don't understand, is in most cases, the folks that we talk with, they come in even though they may have a drug problem or some other problem other than alcohol. Alcohol is their base drug.
Yep. Yeah.
And it either got them started or it's continuing to fuel it.
Well, the way to bridge the gaps between acquiring your drug of choice is alcohol.
Right.
It serves a purpose. I mean, I know for me, I was a pure opiate addict, but as it got to be tougher and tougher to find opiates, and then to find stuff that you could trust, alcohol was always there to soften the ups and downs of the high. I don't know if anybody out there just listening or watching us today has ever had an opiate addiction. Dope sick is one of the worst things that you can experience. And alcohol somewhat, alcohol can alleviate some of the pain.
Right.
Or at least you expect it to. And I think, 9 times out of 10, that's how we deal with things, is our expectation. That's the reason we do things, is an expectation of an outcome.
Right.
That's just the reason we do it. And a lot of times we fool ourselves, and so alcohol is one of those things, especially, it's incredible how fast you can build up a dependence. You build a tolerance and then a dependence, and then you got a healthcare issue.
Right. And what we see a lot of here are folks who will come in with either a drug or an alcohol problem. They're doing both, but they want to fix one of those issues and not the other, because the other issue really is, in their minds, isn't the problem, which we all know it actually is probably the primer for the real problem.
It is. And one of the things that we know, and I know from going to school, from dealing with our therapists, and you see it all the time, is that most people are doing drugs or alcohol because there's a Cooccurring disorder. There's something else going on. Mm-hmm. And until you can get them to clear up the alcohol and drug problem, you really can't address the primary issue.
Right.
And so, The other thing that you can't do is you can't fix one and then fix the other. They all need to be fixed at the same time. And that is, I think probably over the last 10 years, that's the biggest change in our industry is that we, the dual diagnosis and coming up with treatment protocols so that you can address the mental illness and the addiction at the same time is what everybody has agreed is the best way to deal with all those issues.
Well, and we have spouses and parents who reach out to us invariably will talk about the co-occurring disorder like depression, anxiety, the mental health part of it, and they'll ask us, well, do you address it? And our answer typically is, well, yeah, everybody tends to address it because that's really, it's fairly easy, particularly in a residential treatment program, to get the substance out of your body. It's that 6 inches between your ears that it really is where the problem resides.
And we tell people all the time, the 28 days in inpatient, or if you're there longer, is really just to get back to some kind of base level. It's really not, it's the start of treatment. It's not the end of treatment. It's the beginning of treatment. And most people, if you're fortunate enough to have the resources or the help from people like us to, go to the right place to address the problem, it's a lifetime fix.
Correct.
I mean, people ask me. Yes. Taylor, my wife, asked me to speak at her 11 o'clock AA meeting Sunday. And it's a gratitude, it's 11th step, it's a gratitude meeting. That's all they ever do. And they talked about how do you improve the 11th step, improving your conscious contact with your God, the God of your understanding. And so, what you do is you go in and you speak for about 5-10 minutes on what you do to improve your conscious contact with God, because the way you and I address our alcoholism and drug addiction is a daily reprieve based on our spiritual health.
Right.
It just is. So it's a daily reprieve. I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll wake up and I'll be a full-blown drug addict and alcoholic. Right. I'm not a practicing drug addict.
You just want to be active.
Absolutely. Right. And so, my comment to the people when I was speaking on Sunday was, first thing I do is I pray in the morning, pray for my God to keep me away from alcohol and drugs. It's the very first thing that comes out of my mouth, out of my brain. And then the way I stay sober, coming up on 10 years of continuous sobriety, is by doing what we do, which is working with people.
Right.
I need to be reminded on a daily basis because I'm thick-headed and because I'm arrogant and because my ego has always been my ego is way bigger than my ability to live up to it.
Well, but now you're using your superpowers for good,
well,
and not for evil.
You hope so. I mean, I think we all probably, we have our moments. I mean, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was certainly not happy.
Sure.
There's an anger, there's a cycle of emotion that you go through, but I'm hard-headed enough where I need to be reminded on a daily basis of where this disease can take you.
Well, in recovery, people don't really understand. Recovery is an action step, or there's a series of action steps where it's funny because some people who come in, as you know, they want to replace their substance use with exercise, or they start gaining weight because they eat more. They take up gambling, something that isn't quite as physically prohibitive to them.
It doesn't do as much damage.
Doesn't do as damage, at least not on the spot. Not realizing that they're not actually dealing with the problem,
right.
They're simply pushing it off to the side and going. I love that people particularly goes, well, I'm hitting the gym. Okay, well that's great, but and I tell you, it came home to roost for me when after I got sober, both my parents and my wife died in a 3-year period, and I will tell you, I wasn't drinking and I wasn't doing drugs, but I was batshit crazy. And I talk about this all the time because you don't realize, even though I had done a ton of work, you do not realize that bugaboo can come back at you at any moment.
It can, and you know, it's like a campfire that never really goes out. It can flame back up in about half a second.
Those embers are always there.
Yeah, they do, and you know, that was the thing that we really wanted. The point we wanted to try and make this morning is, if you've got somebody who needs some help, there's some things that you can, and you know, things that you should do, things that you can do. But the one thing that you can't do is you can't make somebody get help. You can help them if they want help.
Yeah.
But we probably end up sometimes more as a referee than we do as a navigator, a treatment navigator, because the parents or the spouse or the siblings, they want the person to get help, but the person who needs the help doesn't have any interest in it.
Well, and it's funny you should bring this up because it really dovetails. We had the mother of a 31-year-old woman reach out to us last night on our website, and I talked to her this morning, and the mother, the woman, the 31-year-old was living with her mother because she couldn't be trusted to live by herself and do it, you know, not take drugs. But the problem is that the mother was not equipped to handle any of this. All she knew was that her daughter was in her house and she was alive. But virtually everything she was doing and had done at that point wasn't progressing, wasn't getting her daughter closer to getting help. It was simply keeping her alive and at bay. Now that's important, but and talking with her, I explained to her that you actually your daughter has no resources, so you actually have some leverage that you could use if you really wanted to get her help. I even asked her, I said, "Is your daughter interested in getting help?" She goes, "Well, not really." But then how in the world are we going to push her to that point where she wants to get help? And the mother had no clue. And the things that I was going to have to tell her were counterintuitive to what most people would think would actually help her.
Right.
And you know that you hear this all the time. I mean, parents particularly are horrendous enablers. Whereas if they simply would treat their child, in this case, a 31-year-old adult, as an adult, they would have a much better chance of getting there.
Well, you know, that the love you have for a child sometimes gets in the way.
Very much so.
And you know, the other thing is that you can't fix the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction. Love is a powerful emotion, and is certainly required for you to continue to try and help. But you don't fix people by loving them straight.
No.
As a matter of fact, as we experience on a weekly basis, it's just the opposite. You have to tough love.
Well, and we refer to it as detach. You have to detach yourself from them.
You do, but you know, it makes when people think about it, and we've had a couple of recently people who came in to quiet the drum beats at home by saying they're going to come in and get help. They don't have any interest.
No, they're just mitigating risk.
That's correct. Yeah. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to use treatment as as strange as counterintuitive as it sounds. They use treatment as a way to continue their lifestyle.
Right. Yes.
Because they're not going to be honest.
Right.
You know, the bedrock of recovery is honesty.
Honesty.
If you're not honest with people, it's going to be tough to stay in recovery.
Very much so.
It just is. And so that's the thing that we want to make sure, speaking to people who call us all the time, I need some help. Okay, there's always the questions that we ask, and they're designed for us to be able to give them an assessment of what we think needs to happen.
Right.
But you know what? I'd say probably 80% of the time, it's not what they want to hear.
Absolutely not.
They don't want to hear about it. No. They don't want to do it. And you know, we'll have some people who will say, "Oh, that's okay. You know, I think we can get through this." Those are the people we hear from 10 months later, 12 months later,
mm-hmm.
and things have progressively got worse.
Very much so.
Because that's what happens if you have a full-blown addiction, it doesn't slow down, and there's no such thing as managing an addiction. Eventually, it will reach into your pocket and take everything there is, and we see it on a daily basis. And so, do yourself a favor. Speak to people who know what they're talking about. Be careful with the internet information that you get.
We were talking about this earlier. Everyone's website looks great, doesn't it?
It does. Amazing.
Except ours, of course. Ours is garbage because but to that point, if you know the talking points, and most people in this business do, you can make anything sound great until you're actually in and having to deal with it. And even the treatment part of this, there's a lot more action that goes into this than people are aware of, because every day is different, every person is different, and every situation requires a different twist to it. I love treatment programs that specialize in what I refer to as one type of medicine. So if you don't fit neatly into the little box, they'll bring you in and work on you, but at some point you're not going to cooperate within that box, and it won't feel good for you as the patient or the client, and it probably won't work the way it should if you aren't capable of adjusting to what they need, which is what we do here.
It is, and it's a stark reminder to me when I visit with a lot of the people that come into our program, and even the people that I meet through the rooms of AA, or just anybody who knows me knows that back in the day I played a lot of golf, and I still play some golf tournaments. So I'm around 100 guys. Golfers enjoy their alcohol, and some of them enjoy more than that. And so I'm always amazed at the conversations. But I can always tell somebody, if somebody's in recovery, you can always tell what stage they're in by having your conversation with them.
Right. And
I will tell you that you can't fake recovery.
No.
You can't. Not to somebody who's in recovery.
No.
I had a really a nice guy. I met him. He was kind of down and out. I got him a hotel room. I got him into a homeless shelter. But one of the things I noticed, even though he was not using, he was still trying to shorten the process of everything so it fit his schedule more. And I always try to explain to him, you're not willing to do whatever you need to do to get sober. And so he would always, because he was smart and because he knew what was best for him, he never completed anything. And so now it's been 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Hadn't heard from him.
Well, we see this from parents and spouses too, who just want them to get over it, or they want it to go away, and they don't comprehend the fact that it took, in some cases, decades for them to get to this place, and it's going to take them decades to get out of it. Now, and you're never out of it, but it's never going to be it's never a quick fix. It just doesn't happen that way.
It's not, and it's one of my good friends down in Greenville, when I first got sober, he looked at me, he says, "You do realize," he says, "it's 10 miles into the woods." He said, "That means it's 10 miles back out." And so for me, I had a 40 year addiction to alcohol and drugs. You don't get over that in 30 days.
No.
So it's been 10 years, and here I am. I'm still working on it.
Well, and life keeps coming at you. I mean, life's put a whole lot of stuff. I know your story, man. A lot of stuff in front of you, and you've had to deal with that while you're dealing with this incredibly deadly disease. Now you've got another disease you're dealing with.
Yeah.
In addition to life in general.
Right. It's interesting. I told my transplant doctor this week. He told me. He said things look good. He said, I don't need to see you for 6 more months. He said, you seem to be dealing with this pretty good. And I said, I was fortunate. And he kind of looked at me. He said, fortunate? I said, yeah. I said, I'm dealing with cancer the same way I deal with my addiction, which is a day at a time.
Right.
I'm gonna have this disease for the rest of my life, just like I'm gonna have my alcoholism for the rest of my life. So I've got experience.
Mate, you did bring up a really good point, and I addressed it earlier. As unfortunate as it was for me to be or I don't know how. Let me rephrase this. For me to been given the gift of alcoholism and drug addiction, it helped me deal with a lot of the trauma that I experienced after I got sober.
No question.
Because I don't know that I could have dealt with it.
I know. Or, you know.
Or how I would have dealt
right,
with it.
I was going to say, life doesn't give you an option. You're going to deal with it.
Right.
You just probably would have done more damage to the people that you love the most because, let's face it, you had children.
Yes.
I mean, there was no,
right.
They were going through the same thing you were going through.
Correct.
But they were looking to you for support.
Yeah.
So thank God that while you were batshit crazy,
right.
you were at least sober. And so you didn't create more. One of the great truths about addiction and alcoholism is that they continue to create problems.
Right.
They don't fix anything.
Nope.
They just continue to create problems. Now, a lot of times, the first 5 minutes of a drink or a pill made me incredibly brilliant, happy, and smart.
Right.
But then what would happen is the effect of the drug, the effect of the drug gets less and less, quicker and quicker. That's the devious nature of addiction and tolerance. So I needed more to get the same.
Right.
And pretty soon more becomes its own issue. Right. From a physical perspective. But the truth of the matter is that drug addiction and alcoholism is a lifetime disease for those of us that recognize that. And what we do is we turn around and we use that as a way to deal with it whichever way we decide to deal with it. For some of us, a lot of people that work in the recovery industry, working with other people is the best way for us to stay out of our own head.
I know you get asked this, because I've heard people ask it, but people ask me, do you still want to drink?
Yeah, of course I do.
Hell yeah. I would
But
love to drink right now.
Let me tell you something. I think about it, especially, so I'm back playing tournament golf. As a matter of fact, I have a tournament next week. And one of the great joys of my golf was that first cocktail when I got done playing.
Right.
Because then you would remember things in a more positive way. You could forget the bad shots and you could live in the good shots. But there's a social atmosphere after social gatherings, events, whatever. And so I played on Sunday. The guys called me and said, do you want to play? And I went over and played at the Mid-South Club. And when you get done, there's 12 of us. They're all sitting in there having their cocktails and everything else. And do I miss it? Yeah, I miss it. But you know what? I don't think twice about it because I can't do what they can do.
Well, and a lot of them actually know when to stop drinking because they know they're getting ready to get behind the wheel of a car. And there's a certain amount of logic to going, you know what? I don't want to get pulled over and spend the night in jail.
That's right.
But to folks like us, if you have enough of your faculties, you can always do Uber, but that still creates the problem if you do too much of it.
Well, I think that the great truth, is that life is a lot better for me personally, not drinking and doing drugs than it was when I did. Even though when I was doing drugs and alcohol, I would have argued that I was on the top of the world.
Right. Yes.
But I was on the top of a very shaky world, and eventually it crumbles, and it creates, like I say, it creates more issues over and over again. So, I think what our point to all the people that are watching today is, if you see somebody who needs some help, that's great. You should mark that in your head, but you should also remember that you can't force people to get help.
No.
You can offer them.
Right.
You can speak to them about it, but ultimately it's a personal decision, and I don't care how good you are. If you take somebody who's not motivated to stop drinking, if somebody still wants to, as one of the guys who was in here, it's probably been 6 months ago, he said, is there any chance I could ever have just kind of a small relationship with alcohol? I was like, no. You can. I said, how's that work for you so far? And so, I think that's what we want to, the point we want to get is that if you're going to reach out, educate yourself, reach out to people who know what they're doing.
Let me ask, probably, and I hate to, but I'm going to go back to what you were saying. I've wrestled with that too. Why can't you simply have a drink? Because to your point, I can now, I'm aware of if I were to drink, I'm aware of that. Why couldn't I just have a drink? And we know the answer to that. I mean, I could not drink I have for years, but I could have a drink for probably, I don't know, a year or two maybe, and have only a drink. But my mind says, at some point, look what I've done. Maybe I can have a second drink. And at some point, that logical thing in my head is going to be twisted or turned, and there's no coming back from that.
Yeah, well, and so you were a more responsible alcoholic than I was. Unfortunately, I have one speed, and it's always put the foot on the pedal and see how fast you can go. But I drank so much that I have the physical consequences, and I know for a fact, I know myself, I know the alcoholic that lives inside my skin. I can't have one of anything. If I have one, it makes me feel good. 10's gonna make me feel better, and that's the logic that I always used. And so I use that same logic. If I can help one person, it makes me feel good. Then if I help 10 people, I won't feel that much better.
Right.
And that literally is that's the reason that we always answer the phone. That's the reason we never say no. And my wife, same way. We talk about it all the time. We get the phone. There's a lot of people, if the phone rings at 4 o'clock in the morning, they're wonder what's getting ready to happen. We usually know what's getting ready to happen.
Exactly right.
Somebody's in trouble and somebody needs some help, and so we're going to answer the phone, and they're always amazed when we drop everything to go and help them.
Exactly right.
But that's what we do, and that's how we stay sober. And so, if you're out there and you're living the nightmare of either being an addict or a drug addict, or loving one of them, or having to deal with them on a daily basis, be careful where you get your information. There's no, as I say to people all the time, and we deal with people, Lewis, all the time who've been to treatment 6 times, 7 times, and the parents will say, well, I think he needs to go to treatment again. And I just look at them and I was like, just so you know, they haven't discovered anything that they don't already know. Your loved one may need to go to treatment just so we can keep him away from drinking drugs, drinking alcohol and doing drugs. He already knows what to do. He just got to decide to do it.
Yeah. We talk about this, and as you refer to AA, that willingness has to be there for you to get out.
It does. I mean,
for it to sink in.
It unfortunately it usually requires an event to get the addict or the alcoholic's attention, and finally come to the realization that this is going to turn out poorly for me. I don't want this anymore. I want something different. Mm-hmm. And then we can step in and we can help them get that different. But talking them into getting something different is a whole lot more work. It's not always successful. I mean, we do a pretty good job of it. But we don't press people, Lewis. I mean, I would tell you that the most important thing that you could do is you don't press people, but you speak very matter-of-factly to them. And you know what you do? You have to separate yourself from them.
Right.
And that's the thing that parents, husbands and wives, siblings, they don't want, even good friends, they don't want it, they feel guilty. And we try to explain to them that the only way you can save them is to release them.
Well, and one of the reasons that if you are a family member and you want your loved one to get into treatment and get help, why using a third-party interventionist works is because there is no emotional attachment to that person.
Right. That's right.
And it allows us to do things and to act in a certain way that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do if we were related to them or knew them really well.
Well, and listen, I don't want to come across as a smartass, but we sometimes do. But we can usually fairly accurately predict their future.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, very much so.
And they don't want to hear that.
No.
But we speak from experience, not just our own personal experience, but the experience of all the interventions that we've done, is that this is how this is going to turn out.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that makes sense to you, I've always told people, and we whiteboard it all the time, life is full of decisions and consequences. So just understand, if you want to continue to drink, have at it.
Right.
You're a grown-ass man, a grown-ass woman, whatever. But let's go over here and let's go ahead and identify all the consequences of your decision. And as long as you're okay with all that, have at it.
As long as you live with it.
But do not call me and tell me that you're surprised, because
Right.
we're going to eliminate the surprise part of this conversation. We're going to go ahead with a high degree of accuracy, predict what your future is going to look like.
Well, it never ceases to amaze me. I'm smiling, I'm laughing, and never ceases to amaze me when we tell the parents of an adult child or even an adolescent child exactly what's going to happen, and it happens exactly the way we tell them. And they look at us, well, you were right. Well, we were right because we've walked this walk before. We know, we've seen this. This is not the first time in our us watching the play.
That's exactly
It's
right.
just different. It's just different characters. That's it.
Yeah, but I think the other thing that people figure out is that we really do care about what happens to these people.
Absolutely.
We really do care.
You have to care.
We're not doing this. I mean, I do it for my sobriety, but I also when you help somebody and you see them turn their life around, and then they help somebody, it makes you feel like maybe all the junk we see on TV is not real, because there's so much meanness and so much. I mean, there's just so much conflict out there right now, and so the people we're very single-purposed here. Yeah. We're just trying to help people.
Well, I remember we had Kelly on a couple of weeks or a couple of shows ago, who had gone through the program, and it wasn't a smooth ride. It was a very bumpy ride, and all of the things she experienced were things that we pretty much predicted she'd go through until she finally got to her point, her end point. And you and I were there. We had to get to where we got. Everybody's, they can refer to as bottom, is different, and she had reached hers, and as a result, she had seen the light.
Right, and she's having a good life right now, but we also are, I think, responsible enough to explain to her that this is a temporary situation she's in. The amount of permanency she can establish is going to be based on the decisions she makes on a daily basis.
Correct, yes.
On a daily basis. You can't all of a sudden, 2 years into it, think, well, I can go back and have one glass of wine. No, you know what? You can't.
Well, and you hear people all the time that say, I've got this now.
Yeah.
I've got this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, if you're out there and you need some help, get some. You can always reach out to us here at Wellwyn or the Recovery Boys. One of the things that we are going to do, and I spoke with Terry about this earlier, is we're going to be able to bring some national guests on.
Nice.
Which will be great. We're going to talk to some parents who've experienced the loss of a child or a loved one, and those shows are always emotional. But I think that it's important that people realize. I mean, I think I said to you, Lewis, before we walked in here, I've got 3 or 4 death situations that I've dealt with in the last 6 weeks, and it breaks your heart.
Yep.
It just breaks your heart. So reach out to us. Recovery Boys are at wellwyn.com. And if you need some help, ask for it, and we'll be glad to help them.
Yep.
I'm Lou.
I knew that was going to happen at some point.
That's perfect. I'm Macon.
And I'm Lewis.
And we're the Recovery Boys.
I'm Lewis. And we're the Recovery Boys.